Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show for you. The March Madness bracket, what we've all been waiting for, has been revealed. Selection Sunday was yesterday. We're going to break all of that down in our first segment. We're going to go over everything that is interesting in that bracket, some huge matchups, as well as some people that some teams we need to look for that might be bracket busters. Some of my favorite teams in here. We'll talk a little about some of the mid majors that you need to know about as you head into you making your bracket for March Madness. We're also going to cover a little bit of the NFL. Chase Young just signed, literally not even a minute ago, with the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk a little bit about some free agent moves that went over the weekend, including the backup quarterback market. Kenny Pickett, Justin Fields, both traded. Backup quarterback market is exploding. We'll talk a little bit about that, as well as the Vikings. I want to talk about their offseason. It's been really intriguing to me with how it's all played out and what they might do in the draft. So we'll break that down a little bit. But before we get into March Madness, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. You can leave a tip or donation with anything that you would like to contribute to the show, to the podcast. It'll be out there for me, for you, for everybody to see. It's going to be popping up on the bottom of the screen. Appreciate anything that you do give. Again, that link to tip or donate is gsmcpodcast.net. We are back here off of spring break and just in time for March Madness. All right, March Madness, the bracket has officially been revealed. The one seeds, not too surprisingly, 3 of them were already locked in. The question was between North Carolina and Tennessee for that final one seed. They ended up giving it to North Carolina, but the one seeds are UConn, the defending national champions, the number 1 overall seed, and a juggernaut in this tournament. As well as Houston, whose defensive prowess, probably the best defense in the country. And for those who know defense, it knows how basketball works, especially college basketball. If you have an elite defense, you can compete with anybody, as long as you are hitting shots on the other end. Now, it does come with drawbacks. Houston's a very good team, though. And then Purdue, we know all about Purdue. They have reigning player of the year, college player of the year, Zach Edey. In the center, the 7-foot-tall monster behemoth down there, who's really stepped up his game this season. A lot of people see him and they're like, oh, it's Zach Edey, he's the same guy. No, he's gotten a lot better at defense. So Purdue should not lose in the first round. That's my bold prediction. They make it past the 16 seed. And the final one seed we already mentioned, that is North Carolina. North Carolina, who, heading into the ACC Championships tournament, was playing like the best team in the nation. They ran into a way too hot NC State team, an NC State team that on their way through North Carolina knocked off Duke, knocked off Virginia to win the ACC, all teams that made the NCAA tournament, Virginia as a play-in team. So it's a very interesting bracket. We're just going to go by region. We're going to start in the East. We talked about UConn. They're the number 1 overall seed. The East region is theirs. There's one serious contender that I think might have a shot against them, and that's Iowa State because of their defense, but Iowa State offensively probably is not enough to get past UConn. UConn is a juggernaut of a team. They are coming off winning a national title, and they showed no signs of slowing down. They were in the top 5 basically all season. They held the number 1 slot in the AP poll for a couple weeks. But this bottom of the bracket here, when we're talking about Iowa State, Washington State, and Drake, that's my favorite game in this year, in this region, the Washington State Drake game, because you look at 2 teams. I think that's the biggest toss-up. You might look at me and say there's a couple big toss-ups here. That one down there, the defense from, again, defense. You'll hear this from me as we start to break down brackets. What I look for when I make my bracket, personally, is defense is so important because you can have a cold shooting night. Any team, especially in a tournament where you have to win 6 in a row, you're going to have a cold shooting night in there one time. You're not going to be able to hit it at peak efficiency because you're tired, because the rim is just 2 feet wide, or for whatever reason. You need that defense to be able to support you to fall back. So the defense for me is very, very important when I'm looking at my brackets. And Washington State, Iowa State, if those two meet in the second round, that is going to be a defensive battle. Both of them have top 10 defenses in the entire country by a couple metrics. And I'm very excited for that if that does happen. Drake is not a team to be slept on, though. Drake coming out of the Mountain West, Arch Madness, as they call it. They beat Indiana State, the kind of favorite team there, the Sycamores. People were really rallying behind them. They just missed the bracket. I think they were the first team out, actually. But Drake beat them in a very competitive conference. They earn a 10 seed. That is a game to watch out for. In this same region, word was not coming to my brain. In this same region, you have FAU and Northwestern. FAU, the darling of last year's tournament, made it all the way to the Final Four. We talk about their run. They brought everybody back. Literally every single starter. They are a very experienced team. You'd think a couple of them would leave or go to another team, graduate. No. Every single player from that Final Four team is back, and they have an 8 seed. They have an 8 seed now. I don't think they're going to make quite the same run. They could beat Northwestern. I'm not a big believer in them. Their defense has really fallen off a cliff. I'm not sure if that's because of their move into a bigger conference or if that's because they were like, we were so good last year, we know what we're doing. We're not going to try as much on defense. I'm not sure exactly why that would be. But their defense took a nosedive. And Northwestern, I think, is going to beat them in round one. So I've got a couple upsets here. The other one, and the biggest toss-up for me in the East, is San Diego State UAB. UAB, who has been one of the hottest teams down the stretch. And San Diego State is just a very, very good basketball team. Those are my toss-ups there. So on watch, FAU, San Diego State, and Washington State, I think should all be on watch there. We move into the Southwest, the next region, Houston's region. They've got a couple, and this is a really interesting region. I think this one might have one of the best matchups in the entire first round between James Madison and Wisconsin. And I'm going to try not to let my bias get in the way here, because I do attend James Madison University, so I want to put that out there before we get into the breakdown of that team, because I think it's a very good team, and I don't want to sit here and not have that little background information for you. That I'm gonna try not to be biased, but it's gonna show up in there a little bit. But we'll get into that when we get into the mid majors. I think they're a very good team, and they could threaten a deep run. But Houston at the top, we talked about them. They are my national championship pick. I love their defense. Again, I just went into a whole diatribe about defense. Defense wins games. Defense wins championships. And if you can shut down your opponent, you're going to win that game. Especially with the offense that Houston has. I mean, they've got Marcus Sasser. They've got a lot of huge guys on their team, averaging 20-plus points. It's tough to stop that team, especially when they're making shots and their defense is on, and their defense is always on. So Houston is my pick for the national champion. Kentucky's an interesting one. I've had some discussions about Kentucky with people, and I'm not too high on them. I think they get the benefit of the doubt with a couple of their first matchups, but I don't think they're that good. I think them playing Oakland there, I think they'll win that first game. But depending on who they play in the second round, they might not make it out of the round of 32. I think if they get Texas Tech is a good enough team that they can shut down a Kentucky team that's been kind of inconsistent. Um, NC State, on the other hand, I know they just went on this miracle run. They were the 10 seed in the ACC tournament. They go in this run and win it all. Buzzer beaters, all that jazz, everything that you want in a Cinderella story. But NC State is not that great of a team. They're a good team, don't get me wrong, but there's a reason they were the 10 seed in the ACC, right? They can compete with anybody. They can. They're average. They're good at almost everything, but they're not great at anything. NC State is hot right now, and what you never want to do is discount a team that's hot. I think NC State's going to continue their run, but having a couple days off is not good for them. The NC State is a team that needed to win that ACC tournament on Sunday and then keep going. They needed to start games today if they wanted to keep that hot streak going. And I'm not sure how it's going to go. They're traveling. They're leaving that one arena. Maybe it was their arena in the ACC tournament that, helped them get hot. You never know what it is. NC State, Texas Tech is going to be interesting. I think it's either going to be a tight game that NC State pulls out or Texas Tech is going to blow them out. It's interesting. We'll keep an eye on those. Real quick before we finish this up, another team that I want to get into in a little bit, McNeese State. We'll get into all those mid-majors in the second round, but keep an eye out on their game versus Gonzaga. We'll talk about all that. Tennessee is another team that I think people should watch out for. They have Dalton Knecht, who has been going off. He made it into lottery discussions. It's going to be a really good tournament. There were a couple questions, and my biggest question with this bracket really is Michigan State having a 9 seed. Michigan State was on the bubble conversations. They were projected to be out by certain analysts, first four kind of team, but a 9 seed kind of shocks me. I know a lot of people have been kind of all over the place with these teams, but that's the one. I was almost certain they weren't going to make, or they were going to be a first four team. They were going to be where Virginia is sitting, a 10 seed playing in the first four. But keep an eye out on that. Michigan State is my biggest surprise for seeding, at least. In our next segment, we are going to talk about mid-majors. We already kind of went into a little bit because that's the stuff that I was doing a lot of research on today. Mid-majors that can bust your bracket. Teams you never heard of that are going to come out and be tournament darlings, tournament favorite, those Cinderella guys you need to watch out for. So stick around. We're going to be right back talking about all that on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in, the March Madness bracket is revealed. We have hit March Madness. It is time. Are you locked in? Have you made your brackets yet? How many brackets are you making? We'll talk about more March Madness in just a second. If you are just tuning in, we talked about the whole bracket. We did a little bit of breakdown on some teams. my pick for the March Madness winners and some matchups to look out for. In this segment, we are going to talk about the mid-major Cinderella teams, the teams, these double-digit seeds that you haven't heard of that might go deep, that you should keep an eye on, and that you should be prepared to bust your bracket. And we'll talk about all that in just a second. After this segment, we're also going to get into some NFL with the Vikings and the expanding role of backup quarterbacks. So stick around for that. There's a lot to get into. But before we get into the Cinderella teams, I'd like to remind everyone that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give. Again, leave a tip or donation, a message with it. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there for me, you, and everybody else to see that is watching across the internet, across the world, in the future, in the past. We appreciate anything that you do give. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Like I was saying, let's get right into it because I'm very excited about this topic. Cinderella teams to watch in March Madness. These mid-major programs that you may or may not heard of that are not national media brands, they're not these blue bloods, these major conferences. They're not getting a lot of attention, but they're good. And they could ruin your bracket. And you don't want that happening. So I've got a couple teams here that I think you need to watch out for. And I'm just going to start off at the top with my school, my current school that I attend, James Madison. All right, James Madison is a very, very good team. They cruised through the Sun Belt this year. They have 31 wins. That's tied for the most in the entirety of Division I with UConn. And the reason that they are a 12 seed is because of the Sun Belt. It's a weak strength of schedule. They lost one bad game. They lost 2 games to App State. App State, a team that beat Auburn. So App State is not that bad of a team. But JMU has a prolific offense. Their offense is 9th in the entire nation, 84.8 points a game. Very, very good. Offensively, defensively, they're not too shabby. They have Terrence Edwards, who can do just about anything. He averages about 3 assists a game, 17 points, 5 or 6 rebounds, and TJ Bickerstaff, who won National Player of the Month earlier this season. So there's a lot to love with the JMU Dukes. They get a tough draw against Wisconsin. Wisconsin, a Big Ten team who beat Purdue earlier this season. That's probably my favorite game of the entire first round. Not just because it's my team, but also matchup-wise. It's not just me saying this. I'm trying not to be too biased here. They match up really well against each other. I think this is really a flip-flop game. I do believe JMU is going to win this game, and if they do, they face Duke in the second round. And my hot take is I think they win that game. You look at the matchup, you look at the way that Duke has played recently, losing to NC State, obviously not as big of a loss losing to UNC, but Duke can get flustered really easily if things aren't going their way. And against a team with such a prolific offense like James Madison, if you can't get them uncomfortable, you're going to be in for a world of trouble. And if you can't respond once you're in trouble, like I don't think this Duke team can, you might run into some issues there. I don't think they're going to beat Houston. The Achilles heel of this James Madison team is when you make them uncomfortable. Because they're very good at moving the ball around and getting open shots, getting these good shots, but you make them a little uncomfortable sometimes on defense, get that pressure up, they're going to start rushing their process. So, something to look out for. Staying on the same side of the bracket, another team that people should keep an eye out on is McNeese State. McNeese State is playing Gonzaga in the first round, so it's 2, I guess, mid-major schools. Gonzaga has kind of made its way into, I guess, the blue blood conversation with how successful they've been over the last couple seasons. But McNeese State does not turn the ball over. They just simply don't. They don't turn the ball over, and they are very, very good at shooting the 3. And that is a recipe for success in the tournament. They play this press style. They're very up in your face, very aggressive. They force a lot of turnovers, and this is where they win the game. You need to be very disciplined against them. You need to not turn the ball over, which, if you look at a team like Gonzaga, like Kansas, who they'd play in the second round, I think McNeese has a very good shot of making it to that Sweet 16, maybe even further. Purdue can get a little flustered sometimes. I'm not too worried about them, but those are two 12 seeds you should absolutely keep an eye out on. They could make a lot of noise in the tournament. As well with them, it's really the 12 seeds are really solid this year. Before we get to them, before we get to Grand Canyon, though, I want to talk a little bit about New Mexico. New Mexico, another one of those mid-major schools. They play Clemson in the first round. I don't think they're going to be that big bracket busters because they are going to run into Baylor, a Baylor team that has shown that they can compete with the best of them in the league this year. You know, they have 12 quad one games. They're 7-5. They've played so many quality opponents. It's a very battle hardened squad in Baylor. So they shouldn't get too far. But New Mexico's a very good team. Don't sleep on them. And the last big mid-major team that I want to focus on, or that's not true. One of the other ones I want to focus on, Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon started off hot. They had the best record. They lost a couple games. They get in as a 12 seed after winning their conference. And they play St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a team that rolled through the whack. Whoa. I apologize for that. That was a very loud noise on my computer. Anyway. St. Mary's is a team that rolled through the whack. The WC, the West Coast Conference, WCC, excuse me. Conference that also has Gonzaga also on the 5 line. It's very interesting to have two teams from a non-power conference make it onto the 5 seed. Very cool to see. I think it's great for the sport. I talked a little bit about that before. But keep an eye out on Grand Canyon. I don't think they're going to make it past St. Mary's. I don't think that's the great matchup for them. But if they do get past them, facing Alabama or Charleston in the second round, Charleston, another team. Alabama and Charleston's going to be a fun game. Those two teams score. They put the ball in the basket. They put buckets up on the board. Relentless. They don't really play defense, so it's really just who's going to shoot better. I think that's a toss-up game as well. It's going to be a really fun bracket, I think. I'm very excited. My Final Four this year is UConn out of the East, North Carolina out of the West. I got Houston as well, and then in the bottom bracket, I've got Tennessee. So it's not all 1 seeds. I do have Houston winning it all. It's a tough. It's just so hard to go against their defense. And I know teams like Iowa State have beaten them because they also have elite defenses. And you can shut down their offense. But like I was saying, defense is just so important in this tournament because you can have your off night shooting. If you play with effort constantly on defense and you can keep up with it, you can shut down any team. There's no team that Houston can't shut down. They just have to be on their game. So, something to look out for there. Those are the mid-major teams to watch. Again, I think McNeese State and James Madison are the 2 bracket busters this year. If you are picking any team in the double-digit seed lines to make it far, I would pick one of those 2. They play really fun brands of basketball, high intensity. They score a lot of points. It's going to be fun to watch. I'd love to hear what you guys think the sleeper team of the bracket is, who you think is going to be the Cinderella this year, if you think there's even going to be a Cinderella this year. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all that. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. In our next segment, we are going to transition out of March Madness, head into some more talk about football. The Vikings have had very interesting offseason, losing their quarterback, trading up for a second first-round pick, maybe getting another one for tampering. So they might have 3 first-round picks this year. I don't know what they're going to do with it. It's very, very interesting. We'll talk about them, what their situation looks like, as well as the rise of the backup quarterback in the NFL. It's been very interesting to watch, especially after last season when people were kind of thrust into the spotlight and the backup quarterback shined on teams that won and flopped on teams that didn't. So stick around. We're moving into the NFL. We will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you were just tuning in, we just finished talking about March Madness. The bracket got revealed. Some Cinderella teams to look out for. Take a look back at that if you are curious. Houston is my champion. Take a look. Be careful for McNeese State and James Madison to bust your brackets. But anyway, we're going to transition out of college football, transition into the NFL. The big topic for the NFL this season has been the trend that I've been seeing more, I should say, more than big topic. It's been backup quarterbacks. So we're going to go into some backup quarterbacks moves that have happened this offseason and how important that position really is. Is it as big of a deal as last year made it seem? Or are people overpaying for backup quarterbacks now? But before we get into that, remember that if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen here for you, me, everyone else watching to see. Appreciate everything that you do give. Again, that link to tip or donate is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, one of the most interesting things to me about this offseason, at least personally, has been the expansion of the backup quarterback role in the NFL. And it's kind of been on the rise in the last couple seasons. I believe for the last 2 years in a row now, it's been the most quarterbacks to start a game in NFL history. So 2 years ago it broke the record, and last year it broke the record again. Last year it skyrocketed over the record. There were so many quarterbacks that started games. You had teams that started, multiple teams that started 4 quarterbacks in one season. That's not supposed to happen. So teams nowadays, especially recently in this offseason, have been paying a kind of a premium for top backup quarterbacks. We talk about a guy like Tyrod Taylor getting $18 million over 2 years. We talk about a guy like Gardner Minshew getting 25 over 2. Sam Darnold getting 1, getting 10 over 1. And obviously the 2 big trades. The Steelers just made a trade for a backup quarterback in Justin Fields after signing Russell Wilson, and that's a really interesting one to me. I'd love to see who makes it out of camp because I don't think Russell Wilson's job is safe, honestly. I think they told him it's safe, and he signed with them. But I don't think I don't think it really is a safe role for him, and I'm interested to see how that goes. I think Justin Fields might end up taking that job because Justin Fields has that extra ability with his legs that Russell Wilson has kind of lost recently. The Steelers quarterback room is going to be a lot of fun to monitor. I am curious to see how they mesh together. Both guys are starters or were starters, and one of them is not going to start. In the situation where Russell Wilson does not start, I would love to see how he reacts. He's never really been a backup before. I know he got benched at the end of last season, but that was Denver, and he was already done with Denver. He's in Pittsburgh now, a new start, and if he is just not starting after, he could have gone to any team. Could have gone to a team like the Vikings that don't have a quarterback, the Raiders that don't really have a quarterback, the Broncos who he just left. But there's a bunch of places he could have gone, and instead he is here in Pittsburgh, and he's not starting. Maybe. I'd love to see how he reacts. I'm not sure how well he would take it, but that's besides the point. Outside of them, the Steelers quarterback, they traded Kenny Pickett to the Eagles, so the Eagles now have Kenny Pickett, who is a very serviceable backup. But you see teams nowadays going out and paying a lot of money for backups because of what they've seen in recent seasons. The Jets imploded without a backup quarterback, and now they go out and they pay a pretty good premium for Tyrod Taylor, who is also old and injury prone, but when he's in the game, he does good. You want to have that security blanket, that Tyrod Taylor security blanket, who will not lose you games. He's not enough to elevate your team to win you games, but he won't lose you games. Tyrod Taylor is that kind of quarterback. He's very similar to Andy Dalton nowadays, or Ryan Fitzpatrick. He'll come in and be a little exciting for a little bit, but not really a long-term starter. But the role of backup quarterbacks has really been expanding. And I am curious to see how much it expands, how much it continues to expand, because we've seen these paychecks go up and up and up for starting quarterbacks. But backup quarterbacks have always kind of been just an afterthought until recently. And the amount they're paying these backup quarterbacks more than they're paying starting running backs. Sam Darnold got more money to most likely be a backup in Minnesota than for Derrick Henry to be the main back in in Baltimore. He got the same amount of money as Tyrod Taylor, who's going to be a backup to play and be the starter. Derrick Henry got less money than Gardner Minshew to be starter backup. That's a little bit of a different one because we don't know what the Raiders are going to do. There's been a lot of backup quarterback movement. Drew Lock got paid $5 million. Pretty solid for a backup. It's a very interesting role. I don't know if it's worth it to pay these guys. Especially for a team like the Raiders, like the Giants, that aren't really in that situation where they need that elite backup. It's always nice to have. It is. Because if you need that security blanket, those guys are going to be there and they're going to stop your team from imploding. But at the same time, you don't need to invest that much into the position. You saw what the Browns did last season. It wasn't any of these guys that they paid. It wasn't any of these guys that they drafted. It was Joe Flacco that they picked up off the streets. He was the one that led them to the playoffs. He was the one that led them to be successful and win games down the stretch. It was old Joe Flacco, veteran who got paid the vet min. That's where this comeback player of the year came from. It wasn't signing them to a huge contract. He came off the streets. The premium that's being put at this position does not make sense to me. I just don't get it. Honestly. I understand you want to have space behind your quarterback. But that's besides the point. The more interesting move has been the quarterback trades. Sam Howell was traded to be a backup. Mac Jones was traded to be a backup. Kenny Pickett was traded to be a backup. Justin Fields was traded to be a backup. Those are four young, untapped in some might say. I think Sam Howell has the potential to be very, very good still. I mean, he's showed a lot of flashes. He's a very one-read guy, but in Washington, it wasn't the greatest situation anyway. So there's not a lot for me to draw on that personally, I think. But keeping him in Seattle to maybe even compete for a role with Geno Smith is interesting. I don't think he's ready, but sitting behind Geno Smith, I think, is a great idea for him. Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence were drafted in the same draft, and now Mac Jones is backing up Trevor Lawrence. Interesting how that works. So is Justin Fields. Justin Fields is now backing up Russell Wilson on a different team. Zach Wilson. Anyway, there is a lot of stuff that went wrong with that draft class. But the trade for these backup quarterbacks, and I think Mac Jones in Jacksonville is a good one. Trevor Lawrence, having him as a backup, I think that's good for him. Sam Howell, I think it's a good trade. Kenny Pickett, I'm not so sure about. Obviously, I think he deserves more time, but letting him sit as a backup, I'm not sure what that's going to do for him. I'm not sure if the Eagles' offense is the best space for him either. He's very much a gunslinger, I guess. He doesn't have the numbers for me to say that, but the way he plays, that's the most similar style. And Justin Fields, I love his fit with the Steelers. I really do. The Steelers love running the ball. Arthur Smith loves running the ball. When he was in Tennessee, he had that Derrick Henry offense, and they ran everything out of play action. And I think Justin Fields can be an elite play action quarterback. Now, Russell Wilson kind of fits that archetype too. He doesn't have that same threat to run with the ball, but he does have these. He has that ability to throw the ball downfield. If that Steelers offensive line can hold, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be really good. I'm very excited for the Steelers. They're probably gonna make the playoffs again. They do it every year, but now they have a quarterback, so I think they actually have a shot to do something in the playoffs. Anyway, in our next segment, we are going to continue talking about the NFL. We're going to talk about the Vikings, because the Vikings have had a really interesting offseason, losing Kirk Cousins, bringing in Sam Darnold, all that stuff. Conversations around their draft, what they're going to do with their multiple first-round picks after trading back into it. We'll dive into all of that and more about the Vikings in just a minute. You've been watching Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you were just tuning in, we have talked about a lot of March Madness. We also went and talked about the big backup quarterback moves with the Steelers, trading Kenny Pickett and trading for Justin Fields. In this segment, we are going to talk about the Vikings offseason. The Vikings have had a really interesting offseason. It's been one where really this draft kind of will indicate how good it is. And I know that's how it is for a lot of teams, but the Vikings had a really sneaky good free agency. They went and got Aaron Jones on a cheap contract. Aaron Jones, who I still think is an elite running back in the NFL if he can stay healthy. They kept Justin Jefferson around. I know they lost Kirk Cousins, but they traded up and got a second first-round pick, and they might be getting another one from the Falcons for tampering. It might not be this year, but they might be getting another first-round pick from the Falcons for tampering. So we're looking at least 2 first-round picks and a team that is missing a quarterback. Now, there's been a lot of rumors around the Vikings in their draft. But before we get into all of that, we'll talk about more of the Vikings. Remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Leave a link, leave a donation, leave a little comment. It'll pop up at the bottom of the screen. We will have a discussion about what you had to say for me, you, and everyone else in the world to see. Again, that link to leave a tip or donation is gsmcpodcast.net. We appreciate anything that you do give. But like I was talking about with the Vikings, they have a very interesting spot to be in because they have a guy in Sam Darnold who is competent at quarterback. And with an offensive line like they have, and wide receiver weapons like they have, and now bringing in Aaron Jones, that offense is really, really skilled. And I think Sam Darnold can do a lot with that offense. Not enough to be serious contenders, but enough to maybe make a wild card in the NFC. The NFC is not a very strong conference. I think they can lock in if they get a quarterback. They have 2 first-round picks to play with. Say you trade up to... And this has been the real question, because I am personally not a fan of J.J. McCarthy, but I know a lot of people are, and he's getting top 10 buzz. If you're the Vikings and you package those first-round picks to move up to, say, 6 with the Giants, or say, I don't know, I think that's the one that makes the most sense if you're trading, because I think if J.J. McCarthy falls to 12, that's where he's going, to the Broncos at 12. So you need to trade up ahead of them. Maybe not all the way to 6, but you might be able to trade up to like 10 with whoever's there. The Bears are at 9. I don't think you're going to want to make the Bears are going to want to make a trade there. But the Vikings have a very interesting decision to make with Sam Darnold, who right now is the starting quarterback on the roster. We saw what they did with all their starters last year. They were still winning games. And I think really if you get a quarterback that won't turn the ball over 3 times, they win 4 more games. Not 4. They win 2 more games than they did last year, and I think they're in the playoffs then. Because what their quarterbacks were doing last year, especially down the stretch of the season, was throwing for 500 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions every single game. And you're not going to win a game like that. So they needed to go out and make some changes, and they did. Now, I'm sure they wanted Kirk Cousins back because when he was on their team, they were pretty firmly in the playoffs, and they probably definitely would have made the playoffs if he was healthy all season. They beat the 49ers with him for... They're a very good team. They're close. They have a lot of the pieces. But the dilemma is, do you just roll with Sam Darnold for 1 year and use your 2 draft picks to really bulk up that defense that is not very good right now? They're losing a lot of their key pieces. Their pass rush is basically completely gone. So do you move up and get those guys? Do you get a quarterback, or do you build up a defense and live with Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold, who's going to make your team probably 9-8, maybe 8-9, somewhere in that range. 9-8, 8-9, 10-6, there's 10-7, excuse me. I'm very interested to see what the Vikings do there, because, like I said, that offense is so talented, and the defense just has so many holes. They really don't have a pass rush anymore. They brought back Harrison Smith. They brought back, and they're letting everyone else walk, basically. They have a young corner core that played okay last season. There wasn't anything special, but they played okay. Linebackers really stood out. They got their guy from Cincinnati, who Ivan Pace, excuse me, I was blanking on his name. Ivan Pace was really, really good last season. He was a game changer in the middle. He really, really elevated that defense, and he's on a rookie deal. He'll be there for a little bit. But they didn't really make a lot of moves to fix that defense. So it makes you wonder what exactly they're doing. I thought they've had a really, really solid offseason so far. But I personally, if I was a Viking fan, would be scared that they're going to trade away 2 first-round picks for J.J. McCarthy. And I know a lot of people have a lot of other feelings about that. And there's been plenty of discussions ad nauseum about J.J. McCarthy and his draft status, how he just kind of came out of nowhere. And there's always a guy like this. Every single year they warn us, there's a guy that comes out of nowhere. It was J.J. McCarthy this year. He's not a top 10 pick. He's not a first-round pick. He was never getting first-round buzz until he won the national championship. So he shouldn't be a first-round pick. That's the thing with the NFL draft. A lot of these guys get a lot of buzz, and that's why people get it wrong sometimes. And the public can really go with it, and I'm guilty of doing this too, But, no one is just going to come out of nowhere. They have to have this buzz during the season, during the college football season. They can't just win one game and then automatically shoot up boards. It can happen. There's always exceptions to the rule. There always is. There's not a single rule without exception. But J.J. McCarthy is not that guy. He isn't. He just doesn't do anything special. Not at the NFL level. He's going to get murdered up there. And the team that wastes a first-round pick on him is going to regret it. The Vikings might do that. The Giants might do that. The Raiders and the Broncos might do that. There's a lot of minefields in the draft. You don't want to be that team. Honestly, there's a lot of quarterbacks that take ahead of him, and you can get those quarterbacks in the second round. If I'm a team that needs a quarterback but isn't drafting in the top 3, what I'm doing is waiting for the second round to get that second group of quarterbacks. Michael Penix in the second round I think would be a great pick for any team. My dream draft as a Giants fan is Malik Neighbors 6. And then in the second round, when we come back at 6 there, Michael Penix. You get some guys, but that's probably not going to happen. Anyway, that was a pipe dream. The Vikings trading for that second first-round pick, I think that was a really, really great move of them. Giving up 2 seconds is a lot, but to trade back into the first round, you can get that value back. You can absolutely make it up. The Vikings, I think, did a very smart thing doing that, but it put them in this conversation to trade up into that maybe even top 3, which would be ridiculous, I think, for a team to do it. But it wouldn't be the first time we saw something like that. You go back down to from 3 to 11 and you get 23. It's not a bad place to be. It really isn't. For a team like, maybe they target the Patriots. Maybe they want one of those top 3 guys. If they can get it for 2 firsts, go for it. I think that would be huge for them. So there's a lot of things for them to do. They could do so much in this draft, and I'm very excited to see what they do. They're the team that I'm watching the most for the rest of this offseason. I've loved what the Bears have done. They've had probably my favorite offseason so far, but the Vikings are the one that I think are the most interesting right now, especially with those 2 first-round picks. I'd love to hear all your guys' thoughts on this. Your bracket, who you have winning. your take on the state of the backup quarterback in the NFL, and anything else that you heard in this show that you wanted to say. I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be back here tomorrow, same time, same place. More March Madness coverage all week. It's going to be the big story. Make your bracket, win it. You got it. I believe in all of you guys. We will be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that